Good evening, viewers. It's all about social and cultural infrastructure in today's show, which I believe is a timely conversation, even as the renowned Godown Arts Center at the heart of industrial area in Nairobi undergoes major transformation to become the largest creative, cultural and community center in East African region. We'll be hearing more about this transformation from the project director and the lead consultants of the project in just a few. Now, in line with this agenda, we have the chairman of the Creative Economy Working Group, Professor Kimani Njogu, who will be talking to us about the welfare of artists in Kenya and what this modern facility will mean to the creative economy and the entire industry. Next, we'll be reviewing the technology behind the facade design of this facility, which will embody a collection of Kenya cultural features. The engineer, Mr. Harpreet Verdi, will take us through the application process and show us the materials being used. You do not want to miss your 2 cups of, oh my goodness, this is Property Focus, your window into the world of architecture, building construction, and real estate. And I'm your host, Peter Ngigi. Welcome to the show. Now, in the last decade, there's been a renewed focus on planning and implementation of cultural development programs in Kenya. Adoption of the new constitution since 2012 has greatly enhanced public participation in homegrown cultural expressions and celebrations. We've seen new creative and artistic expressions by the youth, which has triggered the government to incorporate culture in the development agenda as well as policy creation. These are great steps, and we believe that a holistic approach, bringing together the government, the private sector, the media, and development partners will foster a more vibrant creative and cultural industry in the region. In the spirit, the multidisciplinary arts organization, Godown Arts Center, has launched an ambitious transformation project, which is not only expected to create a huge platform for the creative community, but also increase the sector's impact in the region and improve the livelihood of many people within its vicinity. Now, more than just a building upon completion, the transformed facility will become an experience center. Let's hear more about the transformation from the architect turned musician and now the executive director of the project, Joy Mboya, together with the design team in a moment. Welcome to Property Focus, Architect Joy Mboya.
Thank you.
Briefly tell us about the Godown Arts Center.
Well, the Godown is now 17 years old. We started in 2003. We're located on Dunga Road. And basically our main aim is to support Kenya's creative and cultural industries by providing spaces for cultural production, training for creative entrepreneurs, and then trying to have an interface between the work that artists create and the general public for their cultural enrichment.
So tell us how you arrived at this decision to build this infrastructure.
I think the process has been it's been a journey. It's been a journey of 10 years, collaborating with architects, collaborating with city planners, collaborating with artists, collaborating with Nairobi residents, collaborating with academics, in order to try and understand how do you create a space for 21st century Kenya, 21st century Nairobi, that is responsive to all of the different needs. How do you bring people on board in thinking about designing, upscaling such a space? And so the journey has been one of looking at things from the level of the city, looking at things from the level of public space and streets, looking at things from the participation of artists, how do they contribute to making cultural infrastructure, and then of course working with those who interpret and design these things, who are architects.
Speaking of design and architects, what inspired the design of this Godown Center?
I think a number of things inspired the design, and the architects will be sharing some of that. But for me, I think the exciting thing was to think about design with people and design for people, and to think about how that connection begins to be interpreted into something that is beautiful, and something that of course is responsive to the perceptions and the desires of people aesthetically as well.
And there you have it from the executive director of the Godown Arts Center. Now let's hear from the architects about this project. Thank you very much, Joy Mboya. Welcome to Property Focus, Architect Eureka.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the transforming Godown.
Thank you very much. So how did you respond to the client's brief on this design?
Yeah, we got a very short brief and not a traditional brief. The brief has really been developed together in partnership with the Godown Art Center. to understand the needs. We've been listening closely to see, yeah, what is needed in this context. How can we combine that in this compound, in this art center, and how do we realize it into physical form?
Okay. Were there any standards that were referenced for this design of the institution?
Sustainability has been the base of it. So we have, from the start, we've had the UN Global Goals as part of the project, and just seeing how we can contribute in realizing the global goals through this project. So to creating, for example, sustainable communities, this project is really contributing to that goal. Nairobi is the green city in the sun, and the industrial area is not as green any longer. The last century erased that.
Correct.
So we want to bring that back into the industrial area. So we have made sure to make space for a large tree in the main courtyard, which will add to character and the microclimate and be a nice meeting point.
In the heart of industrial area. Tell us about the challenges that you've encountered, the lessons that you've learned while developing this facility.
The collaborative spirit is really carrying this project. All of us on board are really committed, and it's not like we have our positions. We have created this we, and we're working towards a common vision. So that is carrying us through challenging Zoom calls, bad connections, long distances. So really always coming back to, so what are we doing? What do we want to contribute to, and how can we do that in the best way moving forward together, and how can everybody contribute?
Now, a parting shot.
So as I've been saying, this is there's a collaborative spirit in this project, and this we were recognized for in the World Architecture Festival. So we received an award in December 2019, where they also recognized the process of the whole project, which makes it very anchored into the local context.
Well, thank you very much, Architect Eureka. Up next, we've got Architect Henry, who's going to be telling us about the implementation of this design. So upon completion, what language would you want this building to speak?
I think primarily what we'd like it to speak is one of openness, one that's also very dynamic. Kenyans are very dynamic. In a lot of the discussions we had with the stakeholders on this project, the constituents, mainly the artists community and other stakeholders within Nairobi, was that they wanted it to be a place where they feel, they feel an energy, a local artistic energy. They feel motivated around being in those spaces. They feel that it brings out the creative sensibility in them. So, speaking of the dynamism, is to enhance spaces where people can interact a lot. For example, and for example, in the courtyards, in the artist studios, in the dance spaces, that they be both open but also both private,
Parting shots.
We are very excited about this. We think it's going to be, a major catalyst for the industrial area in Nairobi. It's a place which is regenerating. It's a place which is changing historically from its historic use. And Nairobi and Eastlands are in for a very, very, very exciting facility.
Wow, excellent. And on that note, thank you for coming on to Property Focus.
Thank you.
Glad to have had you.
Welcome.
Thank you for staying with us. We're taking a short break. Then we'll be back with Professor Kimani, the chair of the Creative Economy Working Group, to talk to us about art facilities in Kenya and the state of the creative and cultural industry. Do not go away. And welcome back. We're here with Professor Kimani Njogu, who's a scholar in the cultural and creative industry, and he's going to tell us a thing or two. Welcome to Property Focus.
Thank you.
Excellent. Tell us about the key professions acknowledged in this industry.
Well, there are quite a number of professions. So you have graphic artists, for example, you have architecture, you have advertising, you have visual arts, you have filmmakers, you have musicians, quite a wide array of professions that define culture. There are museums, libraries, publishing, quite a number really. Yeah, huge potential. Many of them are new. Digital technology, for example, is a new area of interest, video games, and so on. So huge potential in the creative and cultural industries.
Now, are there regulators for this creative space and these artists?
Yes, indeed. The Kenya Film Classification Board, for example, is one of the foremost regulators for the film industry. And of course, there are certain challenges with that, that institution in terms of regulating creativity. Many of us see that as a hindrance to the vibrancy of the sector. We know, for example, that constitutionally, the sector is protected in terms of artistic freedom. So, the sector is supposed to be, to imagine and to develop products and so forth and so on. But the regulator occasionally does step in to say, you cannot create in this particular way. We would like you to create in this particular, and that creates a problem for especially the filmmakers and musicians and so on. We would like, really for those of us who work as scholars as well as in practice of creativity, we would like the sector to self-regulate itself other than to be regulated externally, because once you regulate externally, then you are in the area of censorship. And that is always very difficult when one is dealing with the domain of imagination, because some of the products that we generate are experimental. And when you are experimenting and you are being regulated as you experiment, the final product could actually be problematic. So, so we do have that. We do have a measure of regulation, but there is, of course, some dissatisfaction with that. The Constitution itself, as an instrument that regulates behavior, is actually quite friendly. Because it protects freedom of expression, artistic freedom, it protects culture, the arts and media and so forth and so on, and therefore the Constitution itself is pretty solid, but there are always these efforts to try and contain the imagination. Yeah.
Other than that, are there any other challenges that the industry faces?
I think that one of the challenges that the industry faces relates to financing. Because you see, the industry itself is not, it works on small budgets substantially, because financial institutions are very hesitant to give loans to creatives, because creatives do not necessarily have collateral. So that if you go to the bank and you say, I have this movie I would like to make, and I suspect it will give me money, you're likely not to get any support. Or if you say, I have a good song that I think will sell, the bankers are not likely to give you money on the basis of that imagination. So the financing of the sector is problematic, really problematic. The other area that is also problematic really has to do with space for the creatives, so infrastructure. And if you think about the number of youth that are creatives, they cannot just fit into the space that we have, and we need more spaces like that. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Godown Arts Center and the Transformation Initiative?
The Godown Arts Center provides a tremendous opportunity for the creative sector in Nairobi as well as in Kenya, actually within the whole region. Because it will not only open an opportunity for young people to be able to rehearse, to learn, to interact, to share, but also provide an opportunity for tourism, in Nairobi, and to reshape Nairobi spaces. So it's a tremendous opportunity. I think that if you look at what spaces we have in Nairobi, most of them really colonial. If you look at the history of the Kenya National Theatre, for example, set up in the 1950s under British. You look at the other foreign centers, they do serve us, but I think that there is need for something local, something driven by Kenyans, the creative sector, something that everybody feels they can relate to, easily accessible, addresses issues of technology, addresses issues of space and learning, and it's also global. So for me, it's a tremendous opportunity for the sector, and I think all of us should be able to support it.
And there you have it from the professor. Thank you very much for coming on to Property Focus. Excellent. Up next, we've got the billboard and the materials profile there on after. Stay tuned.
Nebo Gardens is a prime land by Almond Estates, centrally located between Ngong Town. It touches the Ngong Susu Road and the Greater Southern Bypass. Nebo Gardens is located within the urban growth boundary, and the reason being for the government to make the area a controlled special economic zone has greatly influenced the return on investment. With rich red soil and away from the congestion of the city, Nebo Gardens is prime for both settlement and agriculture. The plots come with a perimeter fence, a gate, borehole water on site, electricity connection, well-graded internal 9-meter access roads, and a common area. Get yours today at 500,000 Kenya shillings for 1/8 of an acre, inclusive of transference fee and conveyance fee. You can contact us on 0769 737 454.
In our materials segment, we have Engineer Harpreet, who's going to be telling us about the execution of the facade at the Godown Arts Center. Welcome to Property Focus.
Thank you, Peter.
Excellent. Tell us about the technology, or the facade technology behind this.
Okay, so we were asked by planning systems architects to get involved in reviewing the feasibility of the facade itself and advising on the manufacturability of it. And so one of the first things we had to kind of look into was the materials elements.
Okay.
So because we have a variety of materials that we can use to construct or manufacture this facade. And the entire thing, dwelled from basically looking at the strength of the material, the corrosion resistance of the material, the weight of the material, etc. So once we kind of settled down on a particular material, we then went ahead to kind of manufacture some samples. And the samples using a number of technologies. So for starters, we use basically something called a CNC turret punch, which is a computer numeric control software program.
Okay.
And with that, we then manufactured some of the samples, but very quickly we kind of cordoned on that the manufacture of the facade would be quite slow using this particular technology. And as a business case, we then went on to invest in another technology, which is a fiber optic laser. And this effectively is a fiber optic cable which uses diodes to then generate this laser beam to then effectively cut this material.
Okay.
And that's some of the newer technologies which we are currently looking into and will be using to fabricate this facade.
Excellent.
And then finally we will be looking to actually do the finishing of it. We use a process called electrostatic powder coating,
Okay.
which is slightly different to your traditional kind of liquid paints which you spray. And this is where you then use you positively charge a metal. You negatively charge the metal and you positively charge the powder. It sticks, and it creates a uniform layer. Whatever is not used falls down. We then collect it, recycle it, and it is reused in the manufacturing process.
Excellent.
This is then baked at 200 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
And out comes the finished product.
Wonderful. Tell us about that, right from the drawing phase till the finished product.
Okay, so the application process basically, we start off with basically AutoCAD drawings. Now these are generally either provided by the architects, the clients, or then if they are direct clients, we also assist in actually producing these drawings.
Okay.
From then on, we then basically produce CAD/CAM drawings, which are effectively manufacturing drawings. And what that does is it then takes the architectural drawing, we clean it up a little bit in terms of basically looking at where the laser beam would start or end and things like that. So you actually get a very nice, clean product.
Okay.
And the other thing we then try to do is we use a software called nesting. And what that does is effectively we take different products and we maximize a typical sheet to bring down the production costs.
Okay.
And that way also saving on material itself.
Exactly. Excellent.
So from then on, we then basically go ahead and laser cut the manufacturing process.
Okay.
After laser cutting, then there are folding processes happen, and then before the powder coating process,
Okay.
the actual material is then cleaned in a number of solutions. That effectively removes the grease and the oils on the material, keeping it ready for powder coating.
Okay.
And then the powder coating to release the
Excellent.
material.
So tell us about the artistic, cultural infusion into the facade that you've put in place.
Okay, so on the cultural and aesthetics of it, effectively, we were not very directly involved in the design for the facade.
Okay.
However, having said that, very early on in the project, we had really good discussions and agreements with the client themselves.
Okay.
In terms of we want to leave behind a living legacy in such for this project.
Yes.
So it's not about just manufacturing the facade, installing it and then walking away from this job. It's about what contribution we leave behind. And because of the nature of the work that happens at Godown Art Center, it's effectively one of the things we were looking at contributing is that we wanted to work with the resident artists at the Godown, resident and non-resident as well, in terms of then getting them to basically produce pieces of art with using the technologies that we have now invested into.
Okay.
And that gives them a different medium and an avenue from your usual kind of using canvases for artists
Okay.
to then actually maybe laser cutting on brass, copper, steel and aluminium or different mediums. And even then, to an extent, creating sculptures
Yes.
for them using a little bit more finite design. So
Are
that was
these- Are these some of the designs?
yeah. So this is kind of a little bit about the materials.
Okay.
And this is a typical sample using 1.5 millimeter carbon steel.
Okay.
And you can feel the weight of this.
Oh, that's quite heavy.
Quite heavy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Same sort of thickness, but this
Yes.
is now using aluminium. It's
Yeah.
not as strong.
Yes.
But it's
Wow.
very light.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, like we mentioned, some of the advantages we had, one,
Okay.
light, and secondly,
Yes.
it doesn't rust.
Uh-huh.
So on this particular project, we're also looking, apart from just having core aluminium, we will be then powder coating it to then give it that finish,
That finish.
and an added level of protection.
To give it a good aesthetic feel.
Yes,
feel.
that's
Excellent.
right.
Well, thank you, Engineer Harpreet. Glad to have had you on the show.
Glad to have you here.
Wonderful. We've come to the end of today's show, and I'm sure you've enjoyed yourself thoroughly with the review of the Godown Arts Center Transformation Project, as well as the insights about the creative arts industry in Kenya. The conversation does not stop here. Let's continue with the chats on social media, and I'll see you next week with another amazing episode of Property Focus. I'm your host, Peter Ngigi, and have a wonderful week.